All right, welcome everybody to today's Farm to Institution Network meeting. It's like we have a couple folks still jumping in here, so we'll give it a couple minutes. As we go ahead and get started, as we're waiting a little bit, I'm going to ask my colleague Megan to drop a link in the chat for a demographic survey for MSU Extension. If you'd be willing to click on that and fill that out while we're waiting, we'd really appreciate that. Well, I don't see anybody else joining on right at this moment, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Michigan Farm to Institution Network. My name is Garrett Ziegler, and I'm going to be serving as your facilitator today, kind of walking us through things, through some introductions and some closings. And I'm joined by my colleague, Megan McManus, who is going to be moderating our chat, as well as participating in a portion we have coming up later on the agenda. So, and today's meeting, we're focused on student engagement in institutional food service university, as well as kind of K through 12 examples of how folks have utilized student engagement to kind of connect students and the folks they're serving their meals to, with the food and where it's coming from and how they're serving it. So as far as the agenda today, we're going to go through a quick welcome, reviewing the agenda, which we're doing right now. We'll have some introductions and a couple connecting questions to go through. We're going to hear from Glenn Noffsinger about a project he's been working on around Michigan beans and doing some student engagement through that project. We're going to have a conversation with Keith Soster from University of Michigan Dining, and he's going to be talking with my colleague Megan about some of the things that he does to engage students in his work. And we'll have some time to discuss, to kind of talk through as a group about some experiences you've had with engaging students in kind of farm to institution programs, as well as any questions and challenges that you might have, and just have a quick discussion as a group. We'll walk through some upcoming events, and then we'll be wrapping things up around 3 o'clock. So to get things started, we're just going to have you utilize the chat for this. So throughout our MIFIN meetings, we tend to kind of do a lot of communication through the chat. So to kind of kick things off, you just want to drop your name and organization that you're with in the chat, and we'll see who's here today. And looks like we've still got a lot of folks jumping on here, so that's great. Hey, everybody that's just joining, we're just getting started with some quick introductions in the chat, your name and organization that you're representing today. And then also, if you didn't see it earlier, Megan just dropped in the chat a link for a demographic survey that if you're just joining, if you could fill that out for us, we'd really appreciate it. Hey, everybody who's introducing themselves. Folks. Megan, you want to highlight anybody that's jumping on here today?
Yeah, it looks like we got quite a bit of folks from MSU. We got MSU Extension, some partner organizations. I see some of our partners at Valley Hub. Hi, Josh. We've got Edward with Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. Oh, we have a MIFIN advisory committee member, Carolyn Thomas from Macomb ISD. We got some folks from MDE. We got a really great mix going on today.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We're happy to have you all here today. We're gonna keep things moving right along with a quick connecting question, just to kind of get us all in the mood and thinking about student engagement and school meals. So wanting you to reflect back on a time, when you were a kid, what did you really like best about school lunch? It's a very interesting question. What did you like best about it?
Keith wrote tots. I think we all can relate to that one.
Absolutely.
Yes, breadsticks and nacho cheese. Pizza. Oh, I like this one. Socializing with friends.
Mhm.
We got popsicles. Yes. Little Caesars on Fridays. Yeah. Fries. Being with friends again. Love that one. Chocolate milk because we never got it at home. Carolyn, that's awesome.
Tuesdays were chocolate milk day in my elementary school, and that was awesome.
We have recess after lunch. Yes. Smiley face potatoes. Kelly, I don't know what school you went to. That's cute. Jackie wrote hot dogs, Bosco sticks, and Oreo shakes. All of those sound really good.
All right, well, we'll keep those coming, everybody. Thanks for sharing. And I think we're going to be moving into a discussion with Glenn. But before we do that, I did want to just share a quick example that some of you may have heard in the news recently. That's a really cool example of both student engagement and kind of the the awesome nature of what can come out of farm to school work here in Michigan. So before we jump in with Glenn, just wanted to highlight the work that the students did in Whitehall and through their bean project and the bean muffin project. And probably many of you probably already heard about this, but a group of students were working not only to develop school meal items and specifically a bean-based muffin that also had local sweet potatoes and apples and a number of other products that actually made it qualify as a school breakfast, kind of a replacement for maybe what would be a traditional heat and serve school breakfast. Through that, they developed the nutritional content and the recipe, and eventually learned that because the beans were pureed in the recipe, that they didn't actually qualify for the school breakfast, and have since gone on a little bit of a policy angle and down a policy road to try and change that specific school lunch requirement, that the items be visible to students, I think is what the hang up was. So just a really interesting example of how beans can be a really important product. And I think Glenn, I'm going to hand it over to you now to kind of continue us down that bean journey and provide us some additional examples of where beans have been a great way to engage students in school food and farm to school.
Great, thanks, Garrett. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to bring a little bit of a chef's perspective or a food service director's perspective to this. First, we're going to look at the agenda real quick. If you could go forward one there. Yeah, that's great. So why beans, right? Why talk about beans? What is it about beans that we want to talk about? A brief overview on some of the Michigan bean facts. I'm going to touch base on the local economic benefits of every dollar spent on a local product and what that means. Why beans have a value on the menu, both from a culinary perspective and from a meal pattern and a dollar value perspective. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the fun stuff, what I like, culinary engagement, working with students and communities, excitement about food and different styles of food and tasting food and all that can be. And then we're going to move into a little bit how to utilize beans if you aren't currently, or some additional resources that you can use to develop menus and to meet your meal pattern requirements. Go forward one, please. So I think maybe some of you already know this, but I'm going to revisit just a couple of the big facts. So Michigan is the second largest dry bean producer in the United States, and it's widely recognized not only in the U.S. but globally as a very large dry bean producer. And I think the volumes speak for itself, but we produce, we're top producers, Michigan is, of black beans, cranberry beans, and small red beans in the nation. That's a pretty big deal. That's a lot of beans. I don't have the poundage in front of me, but it's exciting to think that the thumb area of Michigan is one of the top producers of dry shell beans in the country. And the bonus to all of that is Michigan, the dry beans are a 10 cents a meal food. If you're familiar with 10 cents a meal, you may already know this. If you're not, we can definitely get you more information and we'll touch on some of that. But there's reimbursement monies if you're a part of that program to help pay for your purchases of Michigan beans. Next slide, please. So the local economic value, this ranges depending on where you do your research or you draw your numbers from, but it's largely between 2 to 4 times the economic impact for every dollar you spend on a local product, specifically a local food product. So you can imagine for every dollar you spend purchasing a Michigan dry bean, it has a $2 to $4 impact on the local economy in other ways, directly or indirectly, including jobs in Michigan. And if you're purchasing directly from a distributor that's worked with a farmer, you've taken out a lot of steps and a lot of cuts. So you're going to save costs, and more of that dollar is going to go directly to the farmers and the Michigan producers. I pulled some data on local retail purchasing, Carlson beans at a couple of providers here, 2-pound packages. And at retail, they come in around 11 to 15 cents per portion. Obviously, if you're buying commercial, you can do a lot better than that, especially if we've done direct procurement and you're taking out some of those middlemen that get it to the retail shelves. But if you just think about that for a second, if it's 10 cents a meal qualified and you're going to get that 10 cents plus maybe some bonus monies, you're almost paying for itself, or you could be actually getting money back by utilizing Michigan beans. Michigan beans have a great value for that local economic value, but also for purchasing. It's almost a freebie if you think of it that way. And another bonus with Michigan beans is they work on the menu in multiple day parts, from breakfast, lunch, and other components. And they can count towards your meat alternate or your vegetable. So there's some flexibility in that. And we'll take a little bit bigger look at that when we get to the meal pattern. Next slide, please. So this is the meal pattern, a little bit blurry. It's not a great look, but if you're familiar with the meal pattern, this is something that you really don't need a refresher on. But I would like to point out for those that maybe aren't, beans and peas there in the 5th or 6th category down are a requirement on the K-12 meal pattern at a 1/2 cup cooked per week. So the question I'm asking, maybe a rhetorical question, you don't have to fill out in the chat or anything, is if Michigan is the largest producer, 2nd largest overall, and they're readily available here, and they're required on the K-12 menu, and we can use USDA monies, and there's Michigan monies that help support that. Just think about the economic impact if our schools went to market and they procured Michigan beans specifically and put them on their menus. The quick calculation is millions. It's millions of dollars potential available to support Michigan beans on our K-12 menus. Next slide, please. So this is where it starts to get a little bit of fun for me. Culinary engagement, excitement over food that looks good, food that tastes good. I love the conversations that come from talking to people, from being in cafeterias, from being in the kitchen, working side by side with the kitchen staff, seeing what their challenges are or what their excitement is, and engaging people to think about new menu items. This visual is just something I pulled off of Pixabay. It was of a bean patty, and then I threw in some graphics to make it an infographic, so it was an excitement. And then you can put it on your menu boards, you can share it on your social media posts, you can grab something like this and, you know, a 1-question survey, create a little bit of a buzz. Some districts may already be serving stuff like this, but if you're not, consider it. Maybe an alternate to your burger day to have something that's vegetarian or vegan friendly, and to help tell that story a little bit about where the beans came from and the value of those. And bean patties are really easy to make. When I first started doing this, it was probably 20 years ago. So it's not new. And we did them in the hundreds. We produced hundreds of them at a time. They freeze between wax paper, readily available. You can cook your batch for the day. The rest just stay in the freezer. But the run is very economical. It's very cost effective. And there's so many fun flavors, from Asian and Mexican influences to anything you can just about think of. Many cultures celebrate beans on their menus. This one is a Mediterranean style with a tzatziki sauce. Looks pretty good. It's lunchtime, isn't it? Next slide, please. So on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about the engagement before we get towards handing it off to Keith. I've found it's hugely important. It's really something of value to go take the time to engage your student populations and to talk about food on multiple levels. I try to hit 3 to 5 levels when I'm at a school district and I'm working on a project and we're working on creativity on the menu. Definitely the students, broad surveys to help narrow us down. Let's say we're looking at bean items and what they could be. Ask something broad, like where is a typical food item that a student might find beans or like beans? Everything from your traditional stuff like cowboy caviars, chili, it's fall season heading into winter, and different varieties of chili, bean and rice on tacos, refried beans on Mexican dishes, and tostadas. Ask some general questions, get a feel for what they might like or not like. And then we take it down another level. And we try to get into small groups, and we work with focus groups, 10 to 12 students at a time. And that's where we try to narrow down. All right, let's focus on chili as an example. What kind of chili? How do you make chili? What's a Midwestern chili? What's the Texas chili? What's maybe a Carolina style chili? What's some of these foods and flavors that students may be interested in or already have seen? And then we like to take that second step to committees, boards, the school board. We like to tell them about our work. And then we pilot. Then we go to the menu with a pilot or a tasting day. And then we have a pretty good feel on where we're at before we go to the menu. And all too often, there's not a lot of time in the day, and food service directors and kitchen staff are pulled in a lot of directions. So a menu item makes it to the menu without doing a lot of those steps. And it's kind of we'll see. We'll see if they took it or if they don't take it. But if we're going to go through the trouble to procure Michigan beans and to cook from scratch and to line up 10 cents a meal monies, take these extra steps, reach out if you need help doing those, and engage your student population, your staff, your faculty, wellness committees, and do that work up front so you really have a good feel and a direction where you're going before you actually put it on the menu for a menu day. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of a visual after we've done those and we got down to a final vote. What chili would the students like to see on the upcoming menu cycle? And you can see here that straight up Midwestern beef and bean chili was a hit. There was some interest in a vegetarian 3-bean. I think 3-bean chilies always got kind of a good feel in a mouth. It rolls off the tongue nicely. And the tailgate chili just had too much stuff on it. It was kind of a compound chili with toppings already on it. So you could redo that one and maybe pull the toppings off and put it on your salad bar or your fruit and vegetable bar for the day. Let students customize it how they want to. A little cheese, a little onion, dash of hot sauce, serve it with some cornbread on the side for the day. You're in business. It's really important to take these and put them out there. You've done all this work. You've engaged people. Put it out on social media, put it on a school website, put it on your digital menu boards for the day. This is where it ties back into the students got to vote. And so their voice is being heard. That in of itself causes a lot of excitement. Like, remember that chili, a little bit of word of mouth in the hallway. Yeah, we got that chili today. Whatever that food item is that you focused on can create a buzz just by going through the posting of it. And it engages usually the faculty that run the social media sites and the websites. And so there's excitement at that level also. Next slide, please. Going to touch base real quick on these resources. We may walk through a couple of them. Want to get on time here for Keith. So these 4 sets of resources, the Michigan Bean Commission, which I didn't even know existed before I worked on this project, which is crazy to me, but you know, there they are. Let's look at their stuff. A quick toolkit for looking at some of the bean basics and questions, how to cook beans, conversion charts for beans, those kind of things. The Cultivate Michigan website, we're going to touch base on some of those resources that are available, and then I want to run through a website that has some recipes and conversion right on the website for the recipes for whatever batch cooking you might need to do. Next slide, please. So the Michigan Bean Commission and Joe Kramer, like I said, Garrett, if you're able to bring up that web page, that would be great. I like to look at their resources. One, what a great group. They're available if you want to get in resourcing beans, if you want to look for beans, and they have a wide variety of people who can provide, distribute, and or get you the beans that you might need. The bean recipes, if we could tag on that one just a little bit, it's a great spot to look for cool, exciting ways to use beans, right? This stuff looks great. Tostadas, baked bean recipes, bean dips, bean salads. Now these are home sized, so they're smaller. They could definitely work for a taste testing or for something you might want to do. And we'll look at a creditable K-12 recipe resource here in a little bit. But you know, this is a great spot to engage. You know, put this up in front of your students, have a conversation. You know, what looks good, where they might be in their culinary journey, but they might like to see. That's good. If we could go back to the presentation, Garrett. Thank you very much. Next slide. We're going to go through this just for 2 real quick charts. It's, I think, a 9-page basic bean toolkit that's available through Team Nutrition. And this first one here is just a quick how-to. Soaking method, step 1, quick soaking. It gives you a couple of varieties. This is great to print out, put on a 1-pager, maybe in your 3-ring binder with your recipe. Just a quick refresher that kitchen staff can hit, like, oh, okay, my steps, here I go. They can plan to get that first rollout of the beans done, cooked, and cooled down. And sometimes there's this 2-stage cooking process that's necessary depending on how large your scale is. And then if we could hit the second one, Garrett, this one's just a quick conversion chart. You know, if you're going to buy beans, how many cups of beans do I get out of a pound? You can see that 1 pound yield. It's a good thing to keep in mind when you buy beans, they triple. So they triple in size. Not a lot of ingredients do. Pasta typically doubles, sometimes triples. But it's nice to think you get a nice economic friendly menu item that's going to triple in size when you cook. Great. That's good for that. Cultivate Michigan, we'll share the website real quick. Many of you are probably familiar with this already. I'd like to point out we have a new bean guide in the works. It's been refreshed, so that will be here soon. And if you want to promote posters, decals, any of that, these are PDF printables, so you would have to print them in-house, but nice bright colors. They've got the bean facts on them. It's great to put on a, you know, the 8.5 by 11, you can put in a nice acrylic, put it on the line for the day. The poster size, you can put it up on your walls for the day, do a promotion in your cafeterias for the beans. Great, and go back to the next slide. And then this recipe one's really kind of the nuts and bolts I wanted to run through. So this is from healthyschoolrecipes.com. If we could go to the beans, sort by beans. This should pull up, last time we were on here, about 17 pages of recipes for beans. You can filter this down further. It's 23 pages. So there's even a larger grab here. Now, if we could go look at one of the ones at the top, maybe the bean salad. So once you find one you like, maybe you've got some inspiration, your students are engaged, you want to go find a credible recipe, this would be one of those. And then if you click on the print recipe button there, at the top, it's going to give you, fourth over on the right, give you number of servings. And if you type in whatever number of servings you need to create, so we'll do 100 here, and then you hit enter, it's going to convert your ingredients on the left. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it automatically shifted those ingredients up to 100. And if we scroll down a little bit further, Garrett, it'll show you the crediting at the bottom there. 1/2 cup, number 8 scoop provides an 1/8 cup vegetable, 1/8 cup other, et cetera, et cetera. So these recipes, I found a few that needed a little bit of work, but largely these are functional. They're ready to go. They have great pictures. They're printable. You can put them in your ring biter notebooks, and you can get stuff on the menu. Next slide, please. And then just as a wrap up, we wanted to touch base. We'll be at the SNAM event. They're coming up in Kalamazoo. We have a session on beans. We have some handouts, including the bean guide, the updated version, some posters, some decals. Look for us. We're putting together and hoping to make the deadline on an article in the Firsthand News. And we'll also have about a dozen recipes pre-printed as a handout at that event. The last tab, I think, is just resources, stuff I cited for pictures and stuff. So I'm on time and just a little bit early. I'm happy to engage with questions if you guys want to hit anything. And you reach out to me, I'm here. That's what I do. I'm in this world. If you've got a aching to put beans on your menu and you want some help with some recipe work or doing some of these steps, I'm in schools. This is what I do. I've been a food service director. I'm fluent in this. Happy to talk about menu ideas and engage. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Do we have any questions? Feel free to drop any questions you have for Glenn in the chat. I lost my chat box, so I'm gonna.
No questions yet. We've had quite a bit of comments throughout that were kind of fun. And Mariel just asked, do you have a favorite bean to cook, Glenn?
Yeah, it changes. Sometimes I get on different kicks, ethnicity, food from India, food from Asia. And so I'm always evolving. But I said overall, black beans are probably my go-to. I make bean patties out of them. I make soup out of them. I use them on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And they're top producer from Michigan. So go Michigan.
All right. Well, if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to address them as we go. I think we will have time to address any additional questions towards the end or in the discussion portion of the meeting. We can go ahead and roll on through to our next presenter, and we're setting this up with Keith Soster, the Director of Sustainability, Student and Community Engagement at the Michigan Dining University of Michigan, so at the Maize and Blue Cupboard. And we're setting this up as more discussion with Keith. So Megan, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of lead this interview style presentation about student engagement at University of Michigan.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith, for being here. I'm going to ask some questions. And the first one I have is, how have you seen students engage with local food and dining services?
Well, as the director of student engagement, there are a couple of different ways. I think one is through classroom work. And over the years, we see more and more collaborations with classrooms because professors know that they can send students our way to utilize dining as like a learning lab. There are also a lot of student orgs on campus that are sustainability focused. I think the last time I looked, there were 135 registered student orgs with sustainability in their name. I think of those 135, there are about 45 that are truly active. And so we get a lot of engagement from those groups. And then of course, individual interest from students.
That's awesome. 135. Wow. Is there a project that you could highlight for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a couple of student interns a few years back that were interested in analyzing a meatless Monday versus a regular day. And so our meatless Monday is actually called Sustainable Mondays. We got a lot of grief from students that were like, you're taking meat away from us. And so we flipped the script, called it Sustainable Mondays, and really focused on educating folks around waste reduction, initiatives and that sort of thing. We still left red meat off the menu, but offered seafood and poultry and that sort of thing. So these two students took a Monday and a Wednesday, because class schedules align usually like either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And we found that traffic flow through the dining halls stay pretty consistent on days. So when you figure out your traffic pattern on your way to class or whatever, you're more likely to stop at the same dining hall. And so we had about the same amount of traffic flow through a Monday and a Wednesday. And they showed the carbon emission reduction on Sustainable Monday was almost 40% of that on a Wednesday. And it prompted a couple of professors on our campus to consider applying for grant funding to do more research in terms of nudge behavior. And so could we persuade students either through menuing or carbon labeling our menus, or opting in, for example, not having red meat available unless it's requested. And so, something as easy as these two students doing carbon values in a comparison between Monday and Wednesday can really ignite interest on a larger, grander scale, and allow the academic side and more students to be involved in research. So that's just one example of some of the work that we're doing, but also how students can generate excitement and participation in sustainability work.
That's so cool. And I love the positive framing of Sustainable Monday rather than Meatless Monday. That's really cool. So what are students interested in learning or changing through these projects?
I think mostly students are interested in learning what we're currently doing. We get a lot of students that'll be like, why aren't you doing this? And I'll be like, we are, and you can help, right? And so, but there are a lot of times students will come and talk about initiatives or projects or just sustainability things that I wasn't aware of or that we weren't focused on. One example is I had a student talk about palm oil and the implications to rainforests and orangutans. And so palm oil plantations are growing fairly quickly in small countries like Indonesia, but they're having devastating effects to the rainforest and to animals in small villages. And palm oil is a cheap alternative to vegetable or corn oil. And so when it was brought to my attention, I said, hey, I'm willing to help do some more research and look at how we might reduce palm oil usage on our campus. Elimination is a big word. And so part of the work that I do is try to educate students on what's feasible as far as navigating and coming to a successful conclusion on any project. We have a palm oil Zoom event coming up where we have some panelists speaking about palm oil, and we're sharing that broadly on our campus. So, things like that. When we're not engaged in some of the things that students are interested in, then I'm like, bring your ideas. We'll you can help work with me. We get students that'll complain about something in the dining hall, and I'll say, come sit on the food advisory committee. Your voice is important, and we want to hear your ideas. And, students that have high energy and are excited about the project work, especially when they come up with the idea, they're so much more engaged. And I found that that's the best way to be inclusive in our sustainability work, is to invite them to the table and then help navigate their resources so that they can be successful on their goal.
Great. And I think that really tees up this next question. What has changed in your facilities as a result of this engagement?
Yeah, I would say for Michigan Dining, the staff that are now interested in sustainability, that was like, get out of my way, I got stuff to do. They're so much more interested in interacting with the students. And I think you all could imagine a student comes up and asks you a question and you know the answer to the question, and now they're engaged and they're interested in you and your work. Our staff just think that's awesome. And so when you can do, small initiatives, like we first started pre-consumer composting like 8 years ago in our kitchens. And it didn't seem like, a big initiative, but over time it adds up. And so when you can direct a student to somebody that's actually doing that work in the kitchen and collecting compost, and they understand like the outcomes and the advantages, and how much, diversion we've taken away from landfill, that can be huge. And so now we have our staff more than ever are more interested in sustainability because students are interested in the work that they do and want to be engaged.
That's great. So what do you think are the impacts of these projects for students, the ones who participate in them, and the ones who come after?
I would say the ones who participate in them have a better understanding of how to work across a large university. I've worked with students that will say, I spent all semester trying to find the right person, or the right resource. And so being able to work alongside students to help them navigate a large university can really show them what the real world is like out there, and how you can't just like hope something's going to happen and then it's going to be implemented. And so understanding the different landscapes and who needs to be involved or touch the project work, I think can be an incredibly valuable learning experience for students that haven't gone out and started their careers. I think the ones that follow the students, they learn about the originators of the project, the work that they did, maybe the rabbit holes that they fell into, or the obstacles or the challenges, and then they're able to take the project from where it was left off and then see it through. And I want to give you one example, Megan. We had some students that wanted to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles on our campus. And so during their project work, kind of discovered that for emergency preparedness reasons, if we were, to have a major storm or a hurricane or a tornado or something where a main water line was shut off, what's our water source and how would we serve our community? And so they kind of understood the implications of that. But while they were doing the project work, came across some grant funding for a water refill station. And they were like, maybe we could just educate students on using the water refill stations, and that would reduce the amount of single-use plastic water bottles. And since that project, which was probably 8 or 9 years ago, they started with a single refill station on campus. Now there are over 300 refill stations, right? And so being able to go, hey, look at the legacy that you left by your simple project. And because they did all of the work, when I work with students, I'm like, hey, not only do you have to come up with your final report or presentation, but if, like, let's say Notre Dame were to call us up and say, hey, what did you do and how did you do it? You want to be able to hand off all of your project notes so that they feel like they learn from some of your challenges and obstacles. And they're like, hey, we can use those U of M people as resources because they did some of the heavy lifting ahead of time, right? And so just recently, we had a student group that came and said, hey, we want to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles. And I'm like, hey, how about if we offer more choices? Like, let's implement aluminum water bottles that can be used, like you get deposit on them, they can be refilled, they stay colder longer. And if we can educate our community, maybe that'll help reduce the single-use plastic water bottles on campus. And so we're in the middle of that project right now, but aluminum water bottles have been well received, and I'm excited to see what the final results are.
I love that. Going from like a really big objective to something tangible and replicable. Yeah, awesome. I think we have time for one more question. What kind of approach or strategy does a successful student engagement project usually include?
I would say the approach or strategy depends on the project and what the intended outcome is. I mean, we have some students that simply want to change behaviors. We have some students that just want to engage other students. Some people some students that just want to educate. And so being able to sit down with a group of students and talk about what their intended outcome or goals are going to be and how they're going to map towards those goals, I think are important for their skill development and their learning. I always try to remind students, Albert Einstein said this once, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research, would it? And so being able to remind them that it's okay for us as we implement or initiate a project or an idea or concept, that we may learn along the way and we may also fail, but that's okay. That's part of the learning process. And so, you know, my example about the single-use plastic water bottles and how they ended up coming across this water refill station instead as kind of a byproduct, that's still success. And so sitting down with the students and mapping out what they hope the intended outcome is, and then reviewing afterwards to say, hey, maybe we didn't hit the mark, but we're still within the bullseye, right? So I think those kind of things, and leaving the project work for the next group of students so that they can learn and grow from there and take your project and get it to the finish line is always a beautiful thing. So
I love that. I guess we have time for one closing question, and then there's one question in the chat as well. But just to wrap everything up, do you have any thoughts on how to choose a strategy for engagement from your perspective on staff, or advice you'd give to students?
yeah, I guess I would say this. My thought is when you can engage your audience, however it may be, to do an actionable item, then then you're being inclusive, you're building community, and you ask them to participate, they're more likely to do it longer term. And so if it's like, you know, we've handed out reusable water bottles in the past and then asked like people to make sure that they're using them, or like I have these reusable bags that they actually fold up into a very small bag that fits in your backpack, and students will come up and they'll be like, while you're tabling, they'll be like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, well, if you promise to reduce the amount of plastic bags that you're using and you use this instead, then you can have one, right? And so getting the end user to do actionable items, I think reinforces the behavior and shows them how easy it is. And really, for me, it's about building a culture of sustainability. And when we get 8,000 to 10,000 new students every year, it's a constant battle. But when a new incoming student can come on campus and be like, oh, I need to get a water bottle because everybody is carrying one because you want to be a cool kid or whatever, then you're adopting behaviors that you see in your community. And I think that helps catapult forward the sustainability initiatives that we hope everybody is doing.
Love that. Amazing work. I think we have a few minutes for some questions. If anyone has any for Keith right now. I did see that Edward earlier asked if there were any alternative cooking oils that were available from local farms.
I just put in the text if it came through that the Kalamazoo Valley Hub did have on their shelves at one point, and they may still have a connection with a local corn oil. So those two can maybe connect and find that product.
That's awesome. I want to make a comment. We found that we were using palm oil as part of an ingredient, like either in lard or shortening of some sort. And so a lot of the palm oil that you see out there is in prepackaged, pre-prepared foods. Like my favorite candy bar, Snickers, has palm oil in it. And so I think reading the labels and then also understanding what alternatives you can use. Like right now, our dining team, the menu developers, are working on alternatives to palm oil. And you have to be thoughtful of things like how does it affect the quality, the flavor, the cooking time, the structure of, you know, if you're cooking a muffin, like, are you going to come up with a different shelf life or structure of the actual muffin? Those are all things to consider.
Great points. And I think that's really interesting to hear from someone with such a large institution scale like you to hear about something like that. So awesome. Thanks. I'll leave it to you, Garrett. Thanks, Keith.
All right. Thank you, Megan and Keith. That was great. Really appreciate all your perspectives, Keith, on how you've gone about engaging students and in the sustainability pieces and all those sorts of things through your role at U of M. Okay, so the next portion of the agenda for the last about 15 minutes or so, and we're really good on time right now, doing great, is set aside to just kind of provide some discussion time for the group here. I think the best way to learn about, ways to engage students is to learn from each other and to hear about what other folks are doing. So we want to just make sure we had some time as a group here. We're hoping that some of you are in the space where you're either wanting to work more or working with student engagement in kind of the food service settings in schools and universities and other institutions. So wanting to hear, kind of crowdsource some ideas from the group as far as what has worked for you in getting students learning about local food in the lunchroom. And feel free to drop some comments in the chat, but we can also feel free to unmute and speak through or talk through some of your ideas. I'm also curious if any of you have any challenges that have come up, and maybe we can talk through as a group how to address some of those challenges. And I also did want to point out there's a great webinar for farm to school educational activities, specifically for food service directors, that's linked there, that I'm sure Megan will be dropping that link in the chat here at some point. But if you want to follow up by looking for some more ideas from some others through some education, that webinar is a great source for that. So does anybody have any things that they're like, hey, this was a great activity we did, or a great kind of way to engage students around local food? Either, it can be within your lunchroom, it could also be in the classroom. I know there's different programs around things like Food Corps, others that really go to engaging kids in the classroom around local food and eating local food and healthy food.
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I do. One of my jobs up here at Groundwork Center is to be the supervisor for our Food Corps cohort. And one of our service members has been doing a lot of good work with our tribal partners up here, like the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. And they had an event earlier this week where they were making different culturally relevant dishes using I believe the cookbook was called Decolonize the Plate or Decolonize the Diet. It was something along those lines. And so that was a really cool thing that definitely made use of certainly the beans that we were talking about earlier, kind of in a Three Sisters medley that had beans, corn, and squash in different dishes, as well as wild rice and trout. So if anyone wants any more information about how you can get connected, especially if you're have any Title VI instructors in your schools, finding ways to connect with what kind of foods were grown on your lands over the past thousands of years. That's really got students engaged, particularly the students with Indigenous heritage.
Thanks, Edward. Maybe do you just want to real quick introduce yourself and what you do at Groundwork?
Yeah, of course. I am the new farm and institution specialist here at Groundwork. And so in addition to supervising Food Corps members up here, kind of in the Petoskey area and the surrounding schools, we also work with just any farm to school area in the district, including the schools that don't normally apply for or Food Corps, working with pantries, as well as just any other kind of institution where we'll be needing bigger amounts of food to be made with the commercial sized kitchens and connecting them with local farmers to, the 10 cents a meal program is definitely a big part of what we do around here. So trying to connect all these different dots between food growers, food eaters, food cookers, and everyone else connected in food stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Edward. That's a really cool program, and I love the indigenous foods and tying students back to their heritage in that way through food. So that's a really, really innovative idea. Does anyone else have any questions, thoughts, any challenges that have come up for you? In terms of like, we're trying to do this, but it's not working, or some things you've run into as far as student engagement. And it looks like Mariel shared is that the cookbook from that in our chat? So thanks, Mariel, for that.
Also wanted to point out, Jackie wrote in the chat, school and community gardens. One of my community partners created a pizza garden for their middle school. Thought that was really cool.
Yes, school and community gardens are definitely a great way to engage kids, kind of some of the hands-on production and seeing that go into some products in the cafeteria as well. I see Kelly Carpenter Crawford, you've got your hand up. Feel free to unmute if you like.
Hi, yeah, I have a question. I'm here as a community member, a parent. I help with school gardens. And my question is actually the inverse, is some strategies on how to engage our food service director, if anybody would care to share, knowing how busy they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a question on how to engage kind of the food service director with the understanding that they're super busy and maybe this isn't a top priority for them and for the time that they need to devote to getting meals out through the cafeteria. Wonder if any of our food service directors on the call, I think there's a couple maybe, or folks that have been in that position would want to talk through how they've best way to kind of for parents or others to engage with them.
Hey, Garrett. I'll chime in since nobody else is. This is Nola with Michigan State University Extension. Reach out to your local extension office because that is a huge part of what your community nutrition instructor does in your county. So call your local extension office and ask them about that. They should definitely be able to help you. Great question.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nola, is that oftentimes you will find that food service director maybe super busy, but there's other partners that might be out there that are working and providing some of this student engagement or working in schools and another organization that you could connect with to provide some impact. Yeah, and that's a great point, Sarah. I appreciate that in the chat that making the case that engaging students in farm to school and some of those taste testing activities and those sorts of things can really help bolster school meal participation, which is important for school budgets and those sorts of things. All right, any other thoughts, questions, challenges, anything that's you'd like to discuss? We've got about a couple more minutes yet before we'll wrap things up.
I can add in, just working with the food service directors, having been in that seat before, knowing the challenges they face. It's really about the how more so than the what. So if you come alongside them to help them solve the problems that they're facing in a supportive way, help be a bridge builder, engage wherever they're getting the heat from, whether it's a group of parents, a wellness committee, an upset school principal, all the above. Food service, for whatever reason, is one spot people like to stick their frustrations. So it comes out in criticism of the food. So if you're able to, make friends, connect with, and then come alongside them and helping them engage with, well, I can be a resource. I can help you solve these problems by doing these things and outline some of the steps that I went through. It tends to change the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that thought, Glenn. And Edward, appreciate your comment about 10 cents and highlighting that as something that can help ease that financial stressors that are associated a lot of times with local purchasing and farm to school types of activities. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions or comments before we keep things moving here and just highlight a couple more upcoming events we have? All right. Well, if you have anything, feel free to drop it in the chat. But not hearing any additional discussion, we'll kind of keep things moving. So just did want to highlight some upcoming events that we have here, events that we're hosting through the Farm Institution Network or some of our partners. So wanted to highlight that the School Nutrition Association of Michigan Conference, or the SNAM conference, you may have heard it called before, is in Kalamazoo this year, and that is November 10th through the 13th. So coming up real quick, that's next week, I guess. Registration link is in the chat. Thank you, Megan. Also, the Great Lakes Fruit and Vegetable and Farm Market Expo is a really great conference coming up that we are actually going to be hosting a session at for farmers looking to sell to schools, called Bringing the Farm to School. It's part of a USDA training that we're doing a session here in Michigan. So keep an eye out for that. There's lots of great sessions at Expo if you're a farmer or if you kind of work in the farming space. Lots of great sessions in addition to the Farm Institution sessions that we're hosting. We will have a virtual farmer workshop, Bringing the Farm to Early Care and Education. So that's kind of an offshoot of that Bringing the Farm to School training that is specifically focused on early care and education sites and kind of that farm to ECE work. And that's a webinar workshop that'll be from 1 to 4 on December 13th. And there's a registration link available through that. And lastly, I wanted to make sure we get this on folks' radars that we're going to be having a Cultivate Michigan Marketplace event in conjunction with the Valley Hub Summit in Kalamazoo, and that's on January 12th. And make sure you get that date in your calendar. Registration will be coming out hopefully by the end of this week. We'll have that to share with you for both the Valley Hub and the Marketplace event. And for folks that aren't familiar with the Marketplace event, those are regional networking events that we're organizing throughout spring of 2023, I guess, winter, spring of 2023 across the state. So there will be a couple others planned for Detroit and Northeast Michigan and the UP and Southeast Michigan. And I don't think I'm forgetting anywhere else at the moment, but those are great opportunities if you're a school or an institution looking to find local farmers to work with, or local suppliers, or if you're a supplier or farm looking for institutions to work with. So definitely keep an eye out for more info about that. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. And as Megan said in the chat, we'll be sure to share the recording out, slides and links with everybody that joined today. So really appreciate you all jumping on. Thank you to our presenters, Glenn, Keith, Megan, everybody for all your great contributions to the meeting, and we'll see you next time, whenever that happens to be. So thanks, everybody.